7 sub-factories, but they're all in one main campus. They are required uniform. We have a blue hat, and then we have a pink shirt and a blue pants. But we only get one set of it. And workers also wear sleepers. We have a locker room. That's where workers change their clothes, put their phones, their keys, all the medals. Some workers, very rarely, they do have iPhones. But most of the workers, they use some kind of like China-produced phone, which are cheaper. We need to swipe our card, and then they have a face recognition, and then the door will open and you get in. After you get in, you wait in line to go through a metal detector. But that was during the time that I was producing iPhone 6s. When I was producing iPhone 7, they increased their security level. When I get into the 4th floor, I need to swipe my card again and go through another metal detector. One thing that shocked me most, I think, is the attitude of the manager. Like, yelling at workers is kind of a routine in the factories. There are still some facilities on the Kennington that prevents workers committing suicide. They have the nets in the stairs, and also all the windows. They have this ceiling like cage where you can jump from the window. So we live in a dorm, and there are multiple dorms in the factory. Some are located inside of the main campus, some are off campus. My dorm is off campus. We need to take a shuttle bus, which is about 10 minutes. So inside of the room, 8 people live together, but in one floor, we only have one restroom and one bathroom for shower. It's shared by about 200 people because we have about 20-ish rooms in one floor. Workers generally do two things. They either stay in their dorm to watch movies on their phone, or they go to internet cafe to play video games. And the games they play are like League of Legends and something like that. There are different spots that you can have food inside of the factories. One of them, the one that we have most, is inside the factory workshop building. They have 8 types of combo. Some of them are just noodles and with no meat and just some vegetable. Those are the cheap ones, which is like 5 yuan. So in the factories, I spent each is like also they're very friendly. Everybody has a very life and very unique. Particularly in the weekend, they go out of the campus because there is a very big market very close to the campus where there's a lot of restaurants. People get roast chicken sometimes as a treat for their weekend. And people get beer and have a gathering together. But those only happens in Sunday typically. You are not allowed to drink inside of the dorm, and also you're not allowed to smoke in the dorm. And when you were drunk or you're wasted, you're not allowed to get into the dorm because there are some cases that workers fight because of that. The turnover rate is very high in the factories. People left after 2 weeks or a month. I won't say people are proud of their work, but I would say that they just consider it a job that can give them money. Somehow you feel excited. Typically at the end of the day, when the line manager is counting down that, saying that we have 500 pieces left, 200 pieces, you see workers are like smile, they talk with each other, and that was the moment that you feel really good at the end of the day.
That's horrifying, right?
If you've ever used an Apple product, chances are it was made in Apple's gigantic factory in China. It is a sprawling mass almost akin to a mini city, full of about 400,000 workers. But all that glitters is not gold. As if we take a deeper look at things, we begin to see the massive issues that keep springing up. In this video, we're going to tell you the dark truth about Apple's factory in China. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. Let's begin. Zhengzhou, China, a city of about 9.5 million people in one of China's poorest provinces, is the home of a sprawling factory complex. The factory is run by the Taiwanese manufacturer of electronics, Foxconn. It produces up to about half of the total iPhones being made in the entire world. In the busiest of summer days, the factory produces about 500,000 phones per day, or up to 350 phones a minute. The actual park is supposed to be about 20 miles outside of downtown Zhengzhou, separated by a lot of freeways, suburban towns, and dirt scrublands. But with a workforce rivaling that of entire U.S. cities, The factory has blossomed, being locally dubbed iPhone City even. There, factory workers have to live in dorms in 10 to 15-story buildings. On top of this, a migrating workforce of entrepreneurs and vendors set up their shops and stalls below. These stalls include stuff such as street food, offering massages, selling rocks, and other such knickknacks. From out here, it looks like all fun and games. A hustling and bustling metropolis full of happy and hard workers who strive to achieve their goals for the day. But scratch just a little beneath the surface and a dark underbelly is revealed. Critics have long pointed out alleged abuse of factory workers by Foxconn, which has made their lives miserable. They have long said that there is no excuse for Apple's first bloody decade of the iPhone, and even less so for its next 10 years. It has been proven that the insane amount of production speed and assembly time of the iPhone would be virtually impossible without the toiling of millions on Chinese assembly lines. Foxconn is notorious for its military style of management, and it has been blamed for the string of suicides, 17 in total in 2010, that occurred in the factory premises. The company tried very hard to stop the suicides, though none of this was done with any goodwill or intentions. They did not do this by digging out the roots of the exploitation, but instead actually erected anti-jumping nets on their buildings. Never before had a modern factory ever hidden behind such a suicide prevention tactic. It reminded people of the last time such a device was used on transatlantic slave ships centuries ago. Further investigation into the working conditions gives us an even bleaker view of the whole situation. There was a lot of outcry when it was revealed that Foxconn's approximately 400,000 assembly workers were making only a mere 900 yuan a month. This is equivalent to 138 US dollars. This would later be raised by the company to 2,000 yuan for a month's work, or roughly 308 US dollars. This was better by the company, but still pitifully low, as it was still a number way below a livable wage. Many think tanks have calculated that these Zhengzhou workers would need to work about 80 to 90 hours of overtime work each month just to be able to make a livable wage of 3,402 yuan. For context, the legally allowed overtime limit under Chinese law is just 36 hours. In 2012, Apple had promised to work with its partner Foxconn to fix the wage violations and reduce overtime to at max only 49 hours a week. However, this was just window dressing, as in May of 2015, the overtime hours for some workers were still reaching around 160 hours. Many experts do not have any faith in Apple's claims that it has trained employees to understand their basic rights either. It is to be considered that Apple has very recently just backed out from the Fair Labor Association. This is a third-party auditor for corporate social responsibility. The FLA is not exactly the highest standard in labor-related auditing to even begin with, but even then, Apple is not willing to match its standards. Apple no longer has even bothered to ask the association to access supplier working conditions. This has been a hugely regressive move. SACOM has long raised red flags about how Apple's supply chain is very messed up. It has found widespread violations at Apple's largest display screen supplier in Biel. It had discovered that 12 different labor rights violations were being done in an undercover investigation inside the Biel crystal plant. This included endless stories of people literally bleeding on the production lines. Other such problems, such as workplace injury and military-style discipline and management. The investigation further revealed how workers were frequently fined and had their wages deducted for every minor issue, such as not being able to finish their food or not dining in their assigned canteens. There was also a documentary called Complicit, which exposed the further human cost of your favorite smartphones. Yi Yating was a worker at the Foxconn factory as a 24-year-old. He is now diagnosed with leukemia. He claims that the toxic chemical benzene, used extensively in the manufacturing of iPhones, was the cause of it. The documentary further details the horrific reality of the world's largest electronics supplier. Apple went on to ban the use of hazardous chemicals from its final assembly of the iPhone in 2014, but it is still permitted for use in the early production stages. In 2010, the Longhua assembly line was plagued with a string of suicides. Workers began killing themselves in turn. Worker after worker threw themselves off the towering dorm buildings, usually in broad daylight. These were tragic displays of desperation and protest at the working conditions found inside. There were 18 reported suicides that year, with 14 confirmed deaths. 20 more workers were talked down by other employees of the company. The epidemic caused a huge media sensation, with the factory and its working conditions in full view of the world. Apart from the already shambolic corporation response of installing anti-suicide nets around the windows, Apple also made new workers sign pledges that stated that they would never attempt to kill themselves. Many people in and around the factory have given several interviews further documenting how bad it was. It is not a good place for human beings, according to the various workers and normal folks in and around the factory site. Workers have long lamented that none of the work being trumpeted by the media was actually being done. The conditions inside are apparently as bad as ever. Management is known to be both aggressive and duplicitous. Workers are publicly scolded like school children for not keeping proper time. Every minute of a worker's time is accounted for. They are forced to work hard and given promises that are never kept. People are regularly promised double pay for overtime hours in. None of the promises are ever kept, though. People were denied double pay and still paid on the base rate for hours of overtime work. Overall, an impossibly bleak picture is painted where desperation and suicide are totally normalized. Although a proper mass canvassing effort is yet to be made, but the majority of people, especially workers involved in the factory. Many people now know of the horrible working conditions of the factory, but the locals are so poor that such conditions are just part of the game. The workforce is generally young and work turnover is very high.